Before we begin, thank you very much to Jack the Panzer Driver for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you very much for joining the campaign and supporting the channel. Thank you also for having one of the best pro wrestling names I have heard in a long time. Real quick reminder before we get on with the video, the contest for the Lego Optimus Prime only has a few days left to enter, so if you want to get a $180 toy absolutely for free from me, then please go check my video about how to enter. I made it very, very simple for everybody, but this will likely be the last reminder in video form that I am actually putting on a big giveaway. And remember, if you guys like the giveaways, I need to know. So in case I want to know if we want to do a few later on, because I may or may not have some extra toys that I can do this with later on. So let's begin today's topic. So in a recent video, I did mention the Marvel crossover Transformers, because I talked about how much I actually liked the Hulk as like a weird, wow, I can't believe they made this kind of toy. But that kind of got me in the mood to talk about the line in general. And we did this for Star Wars Transformers, so we might as well do it for the Marvel side of things as well. So today we are going to be looking at the second crossovers Transformer line. See, they did the Star Wars ones, and it made the perfect sense, right? They had the Marvel, they had the Star Wars license already. So let's cross it over with the most popular brand we have in-house. And it just worked. Now, keep in mind, Star Wars Transformers are not the highest quality figures, but I don't think a lot of the collectors cared, especially on the Star Wars side. To them, the fact that it transformed was just a really cool novelty. They were in it for the fact that you could get so many Star Wars vehicles that were small enough to fit on your desk and not hog an entire wall of your display. So it worked out for them, maybe not so much for Transformer fans, but it was so successful that they decided to do it again with another license that they already had access to. And that's where we get our Marvel crossover Transformers. And generally, I found these to be somewhat better. I think a big reason for that is because, unlike the Star Wars Transformers, they weren't restricted to what the vehicle had to look like. You know, in Star Wars Transformers, it has to look like the Star Wars vehicle, and somehow you have to make it look like Obi-Wan Kenobi. So you get a lot of shell, you get a lot of backpack kibble, lots of wings going in weird directions, lots of panels hanging off hips, just unsightly things in general for a Transformers toy. So to do this with Marvel means you don't really have a restriction on what the vehicle can be. As long as it seems to make sense for the character it's being done for, you can make the vehicle look like anything. So it actually helped out. It actually let them be a little bit more free with how things work. Like Spider-Man and the motorcycle here. Now, a quick, thin vehicle like a motorcycle makes perfect sense for Spider-Man. And while, yes, when you look at the bike for too long, it does just look like a yoga pose has gone wrong. It actually is not a bad looking motorcycle, and it's actually a pretty decent looking Spider-Man as well. They also did this a lot with Iron Man. And as you can imagine, Tony Stark, billionaire, philanthropist, playboy, whatever that spiel is, you could tell, like, he has plenty of options. There are no end to the things that Tony Stark can turn into, whether it makes sense for Tony or Iron Man. And it's no surprise they got the bulk of the toy line, really. So what you've just seen is Wave 1. It was Hulk, Spider-Man, and Iron Man in 3 very different and very appropriate vehicles. And that's a winner all the way around, right? If a Marvel Legends line dropped a wave that had Hulk, Iron Man, and Spider-Man in it, collectors would lose their minds, because that's 3 A-listers all in the same wave, where typically they would put 1 in each wave, so retailers bought all 3 waves. This is the way they started this line off, and it's a big way to start it off. However, I think what no one realized at the time is that they were really setting the mood for the entire toy line with that first wave, because frankly, the line became mostly Spider-Man and Iron Man. And all of a sudden, their molds were all over the place, and most of them got repainted several times. In fact, I think every Iron Man and Spider-Man released in this toy line got at least one repaint. And sometimes it didn't even stay within this toy line in order to do it. So they kind of fell into that little trap of, hey, these are the two most popular characters. Let's just saturate the market. And keep in mind, they could get away with that as long as the vehicle mode was different every time, or as long as the deco was different every time. So, of course, you could repaint Spider-Man, any Spider-Man mold, into the black suit Spider-Man and get another sale out of it. And, this arguably looks even better because, hey, that just looks like an awesome Venom motorcycle now. Gotta love that. But it started to invade everything else, and all of a sudden, Spider-Man and Iron Man were basically the entirety of the line. Iron Man, in particular, actually invaded another mold that wasn't even his. This is actually the Captain America mold. I'll give you a better look at it later on. But yeah, and this was done for Iron Man 2. So they had an entire wave dedicated to just Iron Man 2 because that was the Marvel movie that was hot at theaters at the time. So 4 different toys came out in the wave. 3 Iron Man, 1 War Machine. And that was it. So if this line feels Iron Man heavy, that would be the reason why. It went so far that the only time they did anything related to a combiner in this line, it was Iron Man and Spider-Man, which makes no sense whatsoever. Okay, so Iron Man and Spider-Man do have a history. In the MCU at the time, they did not. Spider-Man was still stuck behind Sony. So, you didn't really have, this is purely comic fiction. They're both geniuses. They're both brilliant inventors. So it's not too far out of the realm, but really, you would think that if Iron Man was going to make combiner mechs with someone else as anybody, you'd think it'd be War Machine, right? That kind of makes a little bit more sense. Someone who's already on the team, someone who's already used to piloting, one of his robotic suits. We'll talk about that. Talk about that in a minute. Now, let's be fair here. The line was not just Iron Man and Spider-Man. They are the vast majority of the line, but other characters got toys, like Wolverine. And I would argue Wolverine's one of the best ones in the line. Not only because the off-road truck suits him really, really well character-wise, and yeah, the robot mode actually looks pretty good for Wolverine. It's also the fact that his color schemes work really well on the trucks because they look like rally trucks. I buy, this is one of the few toys in this entire line that I believe in both modes, where his vehicle mode actually looks like it might be, a robot in disguise. Imagine that. Oh, and this got repainted twice over, once into his classic colors and then into his X-Force colors, where it looks absolutely awesome. Yeah, black and silver just makes any mold look good, doesn't it? It just works. It just really works. Like I said, that Humvee mold, however, that we saw with Iron Man was originally Captain America's. And I really like Captain America's take on it. Now, this is from a subline called Mech Machines, which got to reuse some of the molds. And they came out in more MCU-esque colors. But the Captain America here works really well. Aside from the fact that it's a military vehicle that kind of suits, so it suits Captain America. I really think the overall shape and design works. I think it's a clever way of putting that, that brush guard in, that heavy, the heavy bars in the front in order to imitate his stripes. That's actually pretty clever. And the patriotic color scheme just kind of works for the vehicle mode. Yeah, it looks a little bit odd for a Humvee. But I could imagine someone decoing a Humvee like this because America. So it works. It actually really works. And I can remember enjoying this mold quite a lot when I had it in my hands. Now, I didn't get to own every single one of these, so my in-hand experience is somewhat limited. Sometimes it might be for the best, though. I didn't get to experience the Thor mold. Probably for the best. I appreciate that they figured out a way of getting in his big yellow boots and his red cape. Okay? That's actually pretty clever. That said, I'm not sure the vehicle is the best choice for Thor. It's not the kind of vehicle I really like think of like God of Thunder. Though I'm sure someone who knows planes better than I do will argue that. But it doesn't really come down to even like what plane he is. Look at it. Look at it. I look at that and I think dollar store toy. I look at that and think knockoff. I look at that and think play school. It's just a mass of primary colors that doesn't really mesh as a vehicle. And it's really unfortunate because you could tell this one is just dominated by the part layout in the robot mode. These are the colors, and this is where they have to be in order to make sense. So the vehicle just has to look like a Technicolor nightmare. That's the unfortunate thing. So that is like the flip side of this whole thing, right? Where they do get a lot more freedom because they're not restricted to what the vehicle has to be. They can just make it whatever works for the character and focus on making the robot mode look good. The downside of that is the robot is absolutely the priority, and sometimes the vehicle has to look like trash in order to make that robot shine. And Thor is probably the biggest example of that. Another mold I don't have direct experience with, because honestly it never looked that good. I'm not a big fan of the mold, the vehicle choice on it, is Venom. Venom is an old school muscle car. Now, if your Spider-Man is that like super racer that I showed you before, all right, that kind of works. That kind of fits in with the character. You can kind of make sense of like the parallels between the two. Honestly, just this toy never felt like it had the right bulk or overall right look for Venom for me. And I think I found out why, because the mold they knew would be serving double duty because they decided it's going to be Carnage as well. I hate when they repaint Venom into Carnage. I'm very particular with Carnage because he is my favorite Marvel villain. So when you give me a Carnage with a waggly tongue, I immediately know you didn't want to do Carnage, but you had a Venom lying around, so you repainted it. I also don't like a Carnage that has white teeth, like individual fangs. I like the black teeth that are part of the suit and the pink mouth. That seems way more intimidating and scary to me. So I'm very particular about how it looks. So even though my favorite villain got a Transformer toy, I never actually owned it because the overall look put me off so much. So much. So if we're looking at other characters that got molds outside of Iron Man and Spider-Man, there's only one character in the whole line that actually got an alternate mold. Well, I guess War Machine on a technicality, but that's just an Iron Man repaint at that point. But if we're looking at like A-list characters, only the Hulk managed to get a second one. And I will admit, a bulldozer still kind of fits the character, but there's just something about this one that is just uninspired, kind of. It's just, it doesn't have the same excitement level as the tank. You know, and I equate Hulk with tanks, mostly because he throws them around so often. But it just, I don't know, to make him go from giant, destruction machine to construction. I don't know. I don't know. This one just never fit well to me. And we'll get to why here in a minute, but we do have to talk a few other outliers that are actually kind of cool. One of them being Ghost Rider, which is literally the only one in the line that makes any sense. Because he's one of the very few Marvel characters who is closely associated with a very specific vehicle, his flaming motorcycle, which he does transform into, which makes this one of the most appropriate and kind of one of the coolest Marvel crossover toys that they ever did. It's stupid rare because it came out toward the end of the toy line and it had terrible distribution. It's the most obvious idea in the world, and if they weren't so obsessed with overcrowding the front end of this toy line with big A-list characters, we might have gotten a Ghost Rider. You know, mix it up a little bit, and we could have gotten a very obvious figure that would have been potentially very popular, even if there aren't a huge Ghost Rider's popular, but he's not Iron Man popular. Let's be honest about that. But I think you could have gotten away with throwing him in Wave 2 simply because, hey, it makes so much sense in the world. And if they could do the Junkion thing and Ghost Rider could ride a second Ghost Rider, you're selling twice as many right there. Probably why they're so expensive now. By the way, photo credit to Sabertron.com. I try not to use their photos unless I absolutely have to, and they're like literally the only good photos of this toy that exists on the internet. As long as we're talking about flaming toys, though, they also tried to do the Human Torch. That was one that actually worked, and well, worked. It looks okay, but like there's kind of this weird concept of turning a man that's entirely made of flames into a machine. They attempted it. Now, it was going to come out in blue, which would have meshed better with a Fantastic Four. Got canceled, though. And they were actually going to redeco the Hulk as the Thing. And that mold works so much better as Thing. I'm actually convinced that Hulk was a pre-tool, and this is what the design was originally meant for. It got canceled, too. To the point where this super fuzzy image is literally the only photographic proof that this toy ever existed. It's unfortunate, though, because this would have made sense, and starting in a whole set of Fantastic Four would have broken up the Spider-Man, Iron Man monotony. If we're going to look at other canceled ones, though, I have to bring up the one that hurts me the most, and not because I like the character, because honestly, I'm not a huge Punisher fan, but look how cool it looks! The vehicle mode makes total sense for the character. The color, black and silver again, always works. And then, yeah, like that big skull on the front of the Humvee. Oh my god, I'm not a Punisher fan, and I would still buy this day one. Canceled. Didn't come out. Here's another one that was weird. Remember I said that it would have made more sense for War Machine to combine with Iron Man? They tried to do it. A second combiner mold was going to come out. Iron Man as some weird light cycle looking thing, and War Machine as an ATV, or APC. And they would have formed this weird looking hover jet thing while still looking pretty competent in their individual robot modes. Never made it out. Also canceled. I really think between just overloading the line with so many Spider-Man and Iron Man, especially when Iron Man 2 came around and that became nothing but like red and yellow crossover Transformers on the shelf at the same time, that I feel like that really put a death nail in this toy line. I really feel like that was like where it declined, because it just got too repetitious. You know, no matter how popular the character is, eventually you oversaturate things and it's just not going to work anymore. So unfortunately, you know, right when they started to do a few new things like Ghost Rider and start hitting some variation in the toy line, that's where things kind of went away, you know, and it just kind of petered out. It did make it 3 years, which isn't too bad. We do notice 3-year cycles in Transformers around these parts, but it is unfortunate that it didn't go any farther than that. Except it kind of did. So, weirdly enough, Transformers still invaded Marvel toys once in a while. Like these flip changers, which steal straight from Top Spin and Twin Twist. It's the exact same gimmick and functionality. And while Transformers is not branded on the box anywhere, you will find that it says that they borrowed from, based on Transformers technology. So even though it's not a crossovers toy, it's still trying to ape what, the notoriety of Transformers. And it's not the only time they did it. If you want something that works more like a battle charger, they did that too. And again, for an Iron Man toy line. And these are more akin to even like, even more just like, it is battle charger in that there's a pullback motor and they automatically spring up into the robot mode once they're, once they hit a certain point. And okay, cool. If you're making simple little toys, gimmicky toys, makes sense. And, doesn't look too bad either. Just don't look at the War Machine. Maybe they should have just stuck to normal action figures. But that's pretty much your look at where Transformers intersects with Marvel toys. Like I said, I thought this line actually did a lot better as far as being good toys than the Star Wars ones did, even though they didn't have the appeal that the Star Wars ones did, either because the novelty is lacking or because the vehicles were the true demand of Star Wars Transformers. Either way, I really wish they'd give this another shot, not only because they've gotten so much better at engineering their own Transformers since then, but also because we've got so many characters who never got their hands on these toys. I would love for like a Miles Morales or a Spider-Man 2099 to get some kind of Transformer that matches them. There are bigger Marvel characters. What if the Guardians of the Galaxy got their own Transformers toys? We don't ever get to find that out. So maybe someone at Hasbro will get the idea again. Maybe we'll see them. But for now, this has been your trip down memory lane for the day. I hope you enjoyed. And as always, I will see you next time.
We parlay with the captain.
You would think a werecroc is going to listen to elvish rules of piracy.
Of course it would be the freaking elves that invented parlay.
I had to think of a quick replacement for the French.